Stop the Week with Robert Robbins.
Hello, our conversation this evening comes from Sarah Harrison, the novelist, Roger Royle, parson and raconteur, Milton Shulman, drama critic of The Standard, and Laurie Taylor, professor of sociology at York University. Our music is provided by Dillie Keane of Fascinating Aida. Now, you know we were talking about being too old for things the other day. Well, the famous French actress Miss Dinguette was never too old for anything. In fact, the mystery about how old she really was became a sort of running joke. And one evening at Fouquet's, another ancient actress who was fond of a joke rushed up to Miss Dinguette and cried, "Mother, mother, at last I've found you." To which Miss Dinguette crisply replied, "I think there's some mistake. I'm married." Just let that soak through the sand of the cerebellum for a second or two and go on to something else. I see that Magnus Pike writes to the Times and he says he wants to abolish Monday. Says it's never been popular, and it would be a great improvement for all sorts of reasons if we had 61 six-day weeks instead of 52 of the 7-day sort. Apart from the unbearable prospect of a 3-day weekend and the hoariness of the myth that we've all got to get used to more leisure, as though the world contained a fixed amount of work which machines mopped up more and more of, when in actual fact there is an unlimited supply of undiscovered work that you find when the machines force you over the border into territory you couldn't imagine existing before. I say, apart from all that, there's the impossibility of Thursday taking on the vibrations of Friday, and think of it as you thought of it in your school days, when your view of the days was the clearest it would ever be. Friday was crackling with possibility. Friday. It sizzled in the frying pan of expectation. I do apologise, because the next day you got parole. Now, Thursday was all right. I'm not saying Thursday was other than amiable. After all, the faint scent of freedom had begun to drift through the open windows. But Lord love us, you can't ask Thursday to be Friday. It's not fair. It's asking Thursday to pretend, and it won't work. And anyway, as to the abolition of Monday, I've got a sort of defence of Monday, but I'll hold that in reserve. It's your turn now.
Well,
all right,
I think
don't bother
that,
if you don't want to. I mean,
well, I think if we're going to abolish anything, it should be Wednesday. I think most of us would welcome a regular break after 2 days' work. This seems to be intelligence. You provide a regular pattern, so we'd never have 3 working days in a row. 3 days work in a row is tiring, and 3 days leisure in a row is exhausting.
there's a lot in what you say.
I think you're being much too gross in talking about whole days. I think that if there's some particular way which Dr. Pike could work out of managing to get rid of Tuesday morning, I think that it is because Tuesday morning seems to me that it is an ontological crisis, because you see, you start on the Monday. Now, Monday is fine, because Monday you can complain about. I know Bob's going to come back to Monday.
Yeah, I certainly will.
But Monday is a day when one can wander around and say, oh, God, it's Monday. That's fine. So you start work again on Monday in the happy knowledge that everybody is sharing the same sort of mood with you. Now, Tuesday morning, when you turn in on Tuesday morning, that's the moment when you suddenly realise that the gears won't engage, because the stretch to the end of the week is too long. Suddenly a sense of the meaninglessness of your life and your occupation enters. And when I began to think about this, I thought I've got to go and find some empirical evidence for this. And I went back to Durkheim's book on suicide, and I discovered that not only one of the most exhaustive studies of when people commit suicide shows that, in fact, Tuesday is the top day for suicides, but also shows that Tuesday mornings is the top part of Tuesday, and also that in spring. So Tuesday mornings in spring, that is the absolute top day.
There isn't an ounce of vice in Tuesday. I'm a Tuesday man. I'll vote for Tuesday. I'm with Milton about abolishing Wednesday. I'm not going to say more now.
What really gets me with Milton, possibly Milton and I are of different religious traditions, but the feeling is why, I mean, some of us are working Sundays, so this idea that the weekend is of rest is a load of hoo-ha. Mind you, it does annoy me when people say to me, of course, Sunday, Vicar, it's your busy day, isn't it? I found...
Well, isn't it?
No, it isn't. Every day is just as busy. I have the philosophy...
That's what they all say, Vicar.
I have the philosophy of Psalm 118. I think if you have Psalm 118
Just give us the
within
first
your
few bars.
this is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Now,
That's it.
unfortunately, it was used by one of these great American evangelists who is either going bankrupt or is on drugs now, and so which wasn't a terribly good starter to the thing. But it is the right attitude for every day. It's fun-packed. Let's bash away.
You're enthusiastic, I see. Now,
But
Sarah.
all these arguments are based on the premise that we must all take certain times off and we'll feel better. Surely the only fun about having time off is when most of the other blighters have got their noses pressed to the grindstone. If we're suddenly going to abolish Wednesday, and please, I must put in a good word for Wednesday. Wednesday is the heartlands of sensible, civilised, grown-up time.
It's an evil day.
Oh,
An evil
no,
day.
I don't. You see, what's all this about the weekend? Let's be honest, we all hate weekends. The reason we like Fridays is because to travel is better than to arrive. And if you look at the week, it is like a sort of geographical journey through sort of the topography of the week. And when you on a false crest on Friday, you feel something's following. You think there's going to be a peak, but alas, there isn't. There's a long, cold plateau of boredom across which we yomp for 48 hours miserably.
There's a lot in what you say, my dear girl. There is indeed. Look, before I get in the ring to defend Monday, I'm not going to do that. There are certain logistic things that have to be decided. And I've written down the notes. Under the new Pikean calendar, if he abolishes Monday, does that mean that Friday becomes another Saturday or another Sunday? Now, if it becomes another Saturday, that means you've got an extra day in which to wonder whether the parking meters are turned off at 1 o'clock or not. You've got another day in which you go round to the butcher's at 4 o'clock and they've already sold the meat out and they're swabbing the slabs down. And if it's also Saturday, it's 2 days when you suddenly take a notion to go to the theatre and they've sold the tickets out. Now, I don't really want to depress Roger. I don't want to itemise the drawbacks of 2 Sundays a week. That lovely Joycean thing, 7 dry Sundays a week. No, but 2 Sundays a week, because I say this, Roger, if you turn life off at the mains twice a week, you may never get it turned back on again. But then, you see, I have a different view of Sunday.
Exactly. It's not turning life off at the mains at all. It's absolutely recharging the batteries. This is where you're in difficulties, and one day you'll be helped. But I can't cope. It was Monday, you see. I was given as my day off as a young curate because it was thought you've done your big spectacular, the evensong sermon, capacity crowd, you need to get over it. But it was so irritating because Sainsbury's in those days were closed on a Monday, and so was the National Theatre. And so I could get no sustenance. And that's why I found Mondays difficult in those days.
Yeah, well, I'll get round to Mondays in a minute.
While we're abolishing days, by the way, it's only a little tiny thing, because we are talking about abolishing Mondays. Could we just abolish Mother's Day while we're at it, while we just have the opportunity? Because if I see any more of those advertisements saying, what are you getting yours this year? It seems to me to need to be reminded that your mother exists and so on, that only advertisers could have the impertinence to feel it was necessary.
I do. I entirely support that. I think we ought to.
It's because the advertisers have taken it and mutilated it while it was Mothering Sunday.
like
It was perfectly
about
all
this.
right.
Quite right, Vicar. Mothering Sunday was a quite different thing.
Just hang on a comment.
Exactly.
I will not
Sorry,
sit here and listen to this. I'm the one that gets breakfast in bed. Who around here's a mother? I'm a flipping mother. I want my cold cup of tea and my burnt toast on Sunday morning. Thank you very much. How dare you,
I hope
Laurie?
you get a sticky collection of red plastic roses and a
Sarah,
horrible squelchy heart through the post.
This is something of a tangent to our serious
Yes, it is.
subject.
I'm sorry,
But look, but it's only, Mother's Day only started about last week, didn't it? I mean, it's very recent.
Well, I'm led to believe this, but I'm jolly glad I belong to the Mother's Day generation. I quite like this sudden outburst of filial affection. They actually do things for me on Mother's
Well,
Day.
that's a very-
their father tells them to.
That's
However, let us
a
get
very
back.
positive statement. Now, Milton.
Well, I just think that while I want to abolish Wednesday, I do think my favorite day is Thursday. Now, Thursday...
There's a lot to be said for it.
I think it has to be said. No one has said anything about
I've got
Thursday.
nothing to say about
and
Thursday at all.
And the great thing about Thursday is it's the day in which I'm always able to keep it for myself. Thursday is my private day, and I think we should keep Thursday at all costs.
Yes,
Well,
Thursday
here,
is
here.
open to confusion because Thursday you're working out whether it's late night shopping, and it used to be early closing in Newport on a Thursday. And,
Are you within easy
Well, I was
reach of
as a
Newport?
child.
I didn't ever know that Newport was open.
Thank you. And I found that very upsetting. So Thursday, I think, has got complications I could do without. Milton.
Well, look, we'll all remember here, I'm sure we do, I don't have to remind you, the time I took my slingshot and did for the kilometre at a single blow. I mean, Laurie was there at my side, not for me to boast of a famous victory. Now, I'm not going to do that for Monday. You'll be fairly pleased to hear. I can't pretend I think of Monday as plucky little Monday, but the thing is this is what there is about Monday. Everything has stopped. I mean, Parche the vicar, but everything's been turned off on Sunday, and Monday requires all of us to jump about 12 feet high from a standing start. Now, it takes effort. I mean, it takes all sorts of effort. We have to do it without a run. You are having to go from the disengaged dimension of Sunday to the fully engaged dimension of Monday all of a sudden. Now, I'm saying this on behalf of Monday, that when you're doing that, when you're gearing yourself up to make that appalling leap, you're making such an effort that you forget how appalling the day is. You're actually, sweating about, you're breathing heavily over your gum shield to get Monday going. Monday is the flywheel of the week, and you're doing it. You're pedaling hard and jumping. Without Monday, the other days don't happen, you see, and then on Tuesday, you can coast a little bit. I'm not going to say anything more about Tuesday at this stage, but I'm saying Monday is a necessity, but you don't notice how awful it is because you're making such a tremendous effort.
But what you could get, you see, it's a very interesting defence of Monday, but I
not
just...
precisely a defence.
No, well, plucky little Monday. Plucky
I don't
Monday
say
sounded...
that.
No, well...
I said I'm not going to say
No, well,
that.
OK, well, I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to hold you to it, but I just want to come in because I am specialising in half days. We could also get rid of Wednesday afternoon. If Tuesday morning and Wednesday afternoon went, we could create a new day.
Wednesday afternoon is about the wickedest time of any.
Games day. It's games, and it's muddy knees. And to me, it's duplicity, because all the time I was at school, I had a fictional doctor's note, which I cited in order not to go to games. So to get rid of Wednesday would be fine. But then I thought you'd have to invent a new name for a day, and what you really wanted was not perhaps to abolish days, but simply, regularly, every few months, to change round the order of the days. So that simply one week you had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday. Now, wouldn't that be exciting?
Yes, but how
all you have to do is drink enough whiskey, and that's the way it seems. I mean...
You've missed the entire point of the letter that we were talking about.
Well, I think that's altogether too possible.
The
Surely
whole object of this exercise was to enable to have some solution to the unemployment problem. In order, by getting rid of Monday, you were going to have I don't know how many extra days in which people could have leisure, and therefore you could employ an awful lot of people. And I think there is something in this, because we are involved with the new technological society, and the British are tremendously good at inventions, and we have an inventive society which could help our balance of payments. And I remember Beachcomber having this whole list of inventions which he thought were typically British. There were leather grapes, revolving wheelbarrows, waterproof onions, and false teeth for swordfish. Now, I think they could do a tremendous amount for the British economy.
I think that in quoting that, I think you too have missed the point of that. And you only quoted the point of the letter to enable you to bowl that one in, but it doesn't matter. I haven't finished with Wednesday at all. You see, Wednesday is without question the most spiteful day of the week. It's too far away from the last time you got parole, and it's too far away from when you're going to get it next. Wednesday faces you with the way things actually are. Do you remember when you were at school, even the mild-mannered teachers who hadn't got quite the hang of the detention system were handing out the 2 hours wholesale? The caning and beating brigade went round the corridors. They were smelling blood. I say that Wednesday is the day that the Pool's coupon you filled in, that he's going to make you a millionaire, slips down behind the radiator. Wednesday was the day that Grendel slipped into Heorot and tore all the arms off the warriors. I could say more, but I don't think I don't want to chill your blood.
It's always struck me that Saturday is an extraordinarily long name for a day which goes rather more quickly than most of the other days of the week. I mean, Wednesday is shortened. Everyone says Wednesday. Saturday goes on forever, doesn't it? It lasts such a long time. And the other thing is that nothing ever properly... There was no Bloody Saturday or Black Saturday. Nothing of significance ever seems to have happened upon Saturday whatsoever. That could go, you know. It could go.
No, you can't.
Roger.
How on earth do you prepare your sermons and get them together? This is the thing that really... this is where
Silly
I
of
find
us.
myself absolutely out of step with the rest of you. And the other thing, Laurie, that's cropped up is the difference in our backgrounds. You see, I went to a boarding school.
So
now,
did he.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah,
Oh, then
so you've lost that one.
No, it sounds as though it could have been rather minor. Because Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays are the sports days in major public schools.
Is that a fact?
Yes, with Wednesdays being core day. Now, that's the day that could go. You see, Wednesday afternoon in core, dreadful.
But Friday is the day that proves that anticipation is the better part of pleasure, because while you're in Friday thinking about Saturday, the sky is blue. It can't be tampered with. It remains intact. Wake up on Saturday, of course, it's always raining and all that kind of thing. But on Friday, nothing can be ruined because it's all just in prospect. And just to bring it a little bit to your area, Roger, I think if there is to be an eternity, it will be an eternal Friday. You know, Friday without end, because there's no disappointments on Friday.
No, but it's also meant to be a day of abstinence as well, a little bit of discipline. And that's possibly
sounds
been
rather
missing.
provincial.
But
I mean, bring that
it's
in.
not provincial at all. You have got to have these sort of days within. This
Well, I
is
suppose
why
you're
Mothering
right.
Sunday is such a good day. I don't like Mother's Day, but you've got to be reminded at particular times, and Friday is a good reminder of abstinence.
And actors
Really?
say
Oh,
that their
well.
best audience is always on a Friday. That the Saturday is a dead audience, but Friday,
Exactly.
that's where the most responsive audience.
I don't know what it is about, but you see, Friday is also for me a knees day, because when you were talking about a knees day, because it was the
That's a
day
new
on
day.
which,
Let's have a look.
as an altar server, I spent long times kneeling down.
Exactly.
The Good Friday service, for example,
Oh,
goes on for
interminable.
hours and hours. I can still, when I think of Friday, feel the pain in my knees, actually, from that particular
That's a
thing.
good title for the new day. Not Monday, but Knees Day.
Knees Day.
Tuesday, Wednesday.
But then I'd have to have Wednesday afternoon is also knees day because of games are not going because I thought my legs were too thin. So Wednesday and Friday are knees day.
Well, let us leave all that, shall we say, to simmer while we invite Dillie to sing to us. And she is going to sing about something that we're going to come on to. She calls it Don't Put Me in a Box, Mama.
The Friday that we buried Grandpa, it was cold and windy and grey. I wept by the graveside a little, then reluctantly I turned away. 'Twas then that my dear darling daughter slipped her small trusting hand into mine, and as she turned her sweet face towards me, I noticed that she too was crying. She said, "Don't put me in a box, Mama, it's dark and there isn't much room. Don't put me in a box, Mama, 'cause I'd be afraid of the gloom. How can Grandpa be peaceful when he knows that he's covered in clay? So don't put me in a box, Mama, when the angels take me away." 'Twas the Monday night after the funeral that Grandma gave up the ghost. With a sigh and a smile for each loved one, she joined the heavenly host. When her ashes came back from the parlor, they were housed in a tasteful blue urn. 'Twas then that my dear darling daughter turned to me with a look of concern. She said, "Don't put me in a pot, Mama, it's small and it's dusty as well. Don't put me in a pot, Mama, 'cause it's got a musty old smell. How can Grandma be happy when she's kept in a jar on the shelf? So don't put me in a pot, Mama, when the Lord takes me unto himself." On Tuesday, my girl took a fever. On Wednesday, the doctor came in. He told me the case was quite hopeless. It was a battle that he couldn't win. Well, she lingered through Thursday and Friday. By Saturday morning, she was gone. And though she is now in a better place, it seems that her voice lingers on. Don't put me in a box, Mama, I can hear her plaintive words still. Don't put me in a pot, Mama, darling, I never will. So I've stood you up in the freezer, 'cause I know you was fearful to die. Teddy is sitting beside you, and your favorite ice cream is close by. Yes, I've stood you dear in the freezer, and it feels like I haven't lost you. And what's more, it'll be easier when the good Lord comes to defrost you.
Well, there you are. Dillie thought she was up to date saying about all those freezers and defrosting the corpses. Well, now you can choose. You can choose. Do you want to be buried down or up? Go ahead, morticians are now offering to bung your ashes into a cylinder and blast you off as a satellite. Spend eternity going round and round while your loved ones come out with the binoculars each evening to watch you twinkle. Well, it's a way of being remembered. That seems to be a powerful urge. Did you see that story about the bulldozers pushing down a school in Wimbledon and finding an OXO tin filled with essays which the children of 1936 had buried under the foundation stone? I bet those kids thought the tin would be there till the crack of doom, and barely 5 minutes after the school had been put up, it's being pulled down. What is that Shakespeare says, as Milton says? I mean, was it not Shakespeare? I should have said Milton. It's something about a man's memory outliving his life by half a year if he makes sure he builds churches first. Now you can't even bank on being remembered by churches for fear they turn into bingo halls. Well a day! Burial and remembrance. There must be a lot to be said about that.
As soon as when you say to people, how would you like to be buried or how would you like to be remembered, people say,
do you often say that?
No, but when you know that you're going to talk about it on this programme, those of us who do research can hop round and question people in the street. So the several hundred people that I sampled, the first thing that they tend to say is, oh, I just prefer to be cremated, or I don't want to think about it. But the second that you do think about it, and you start to decide that, well, apart from being cremated, I mean, perhaps you could have a grave, and then perhaps if you did have a grave, then you'd rather like the grave, well, in some way not to be too tatty, and not too, perhaps, near the street. And after all, you know, I mean, if they had this size grave, and you'd rather not have those emerald green chips, you'd rather have
double glazing.
You'd rather not have the strawberry roan marble, if you don't mind, and you'd rather not have the plastic flowers round the grave. And as you suddenly reassemble your house around you and your taste and your style of life around the grave, if you think about it for a second. So otherwise, even if you think about cremation and the idea of cremation, you suddenly can turn off the idea of cremation because it simply is too final. You may live in eternity, but you would like to feel that somehow you hang around a little bit longer than that. To be completely gone so quickly is something difficult to contemplate.
Well, I know there's a poem called The Bishop Orders His Tomb. The Professor orders his now. I'm glad to hear that.
No, I do quite often, Robert, ask people, you know, what do they want done to them when they die?
Well,
because it's part of the business. And I realise that why I'm back on the programme is because we're discussing death.
That's it.
And so get in that eternal insurance agent, the vicar. I mean, all I want, I want to be cremated in a council crematorium, not a private enterprise crematorium, a council one, because you can get 10 minutes longer for the service there. I want my notice in the South Wales Echo, and I'd quite like that poem, God saw that he was tired, he knew he needed rest, he took him into his garden, he only takes the best, because I think that's rather a nice little tribute to have. And then my ashes to be put in my parents' grave by Llandaff Cathedral, and I think that would be super. And then that's the end of it here. I'm a great believer in curtain calls and go.
Well, I just don't.
I tell you something eternal.
I do not want to be buried in one of those fly-blown off-white bone orchards that characteristically you see from railway trains. All the graves so close together, no room to breathe, that kind of thing. Not a sort of jerry-built necropolitan suburb, and I say how absurd that absolutely is. Death itself is the spirit of impersonality, and these graveyards with all the graves sort of butted up close together are themselves the spirit of unpersonality. But you persist. I mean, here I go with Laurie. You persist in seeing eternity as a sort of, well, it's democratic enough, I've no doubt, but I mean, it's a costume drama in which surely you won't simply be a spear carrier.
No, I don't think that you're doing it. At least I don't think nowadays most people do it because of respect for the dead. I think it's more or less a symbol of affluence. I think that it's basically a status symbol now that most people adopt, and this came home to me when Cohen met Mrs. Goldberg a few days after her husband's funeral, and Cohen said, "That was a very fine funeral you gave Mr. Goldberg." "Oh, I'm so glad you like it, Mr. Cohen." She said, "We went to a lot of trouble to make it very tasteful." "Did you notice the beautiful view from the top of the hill from the grave? And did you notice the casket? The casket was made from the finest oak from the Lebanon. And the handles were genuine gold plate. And then the little nameplate, it was actual gold." So Mr. Cohen, must have cost a lot of money. It cost $35,000. goodness. For another $5,000, you could have buried him in a Cadillac.
I love it. The bad taste note. It had to be struck. It's lovely. It's grand.
But
Sarah.
you see, I think Roger and I would venture to say, have a bit of advantage here, because I think you and I actually reckon that we're going to be back to watch all this, don't we? I mean, the rest of this lot, I suspect, think that that's it. But you and I, we have a vested interest in getting it right, don't we? Of course, exactly. Now, the other thing, I'd like to make two important pleas here. One is for the return of the great deathbed scene, just to take it back a stage further. Why is it that with everything medical science has done, they can't nip in a day or two beforehand and say, look, right, now this is it. Now, send out the letters, get them round, and you can sort of deliver a speech as you lie there stiffly in bed, and jolly well give them the blagging you've been waiting to give them. And the other thing is, if you can't do that, why not distribute little notes of things that you knew about all the nearest and dearest mourners, which they didn't know about each other, and have a kind of formal reading, like a will reading, just after the funeral, before the lap sang and the fish paste sandwiches, so that they've all got to sit there and listen to the things that you knew.
That's what this group will be doing. And this group, on their deathbed, will be determined to have the last word. They'll be making up famous last words, just like at the end of this programme, so in life they will be looking for the closer, the amusing last remark, and waiting for the music to play.
And I quite agree. And to make that happen, they may even be pretending to die, and then they'll wake up afterwards.
I think that's true.
But
This
Roger.
is where the hospice movement has been so superb, that they've realised that there needs to be this proper preparation for death, so that families can be got together, and it's not sort of thought to be a failure if a patient dies, as they think of in a hospital. And it's marvellous. It then prepares someone properly to be on their way.
I agree with James Cameron, the journalist. Who
Where
said
is he? He has passed to where the
he's passed
honeysuckle
away,
ever twines.
and that's why I quote him, because he's an authority on the subject. He says, while other people's deaths are very sad, one's own death is surely a joke. And I think this is a very profound statement, and I think that probably a man who recognized this was Don Levy, the dramatist, who said when he died, he wanted to be like your virgins, I suppose, to decomposed in a barrel of porter and have it served in all the pubs in Dublin. And I would have thought that'd be a nice way to go.
That sounds fairly a nourishing way to die.
Nice way
But
to go.
I just wonder, I have a sort of feeling that when I was a boy, people visited graves, perhaps more often than they do now, or perhaps being a boy, I somehow noticed it. Certainly there were fewer of those little stone plaques that are laid into the grass and which are, you feel are looked after by the municipal fairies rather than anyone in particular. And I've heard myself say, what's the point of going to graves and keeping all the flowers fresh, since the memory isn't there, it's in the heart. But I have to say now, I think really to see the grave tended down the years is at least an earnest that memory is actually alive, whether there or in the heart.
How people need shrines. They need to go to shrines. I mean, my father died when I was 1, and my mother regularly took me to my father's grave, and it was always referred to as Daddy's garden, so it was seen as being something that was alive and alert, and it was marvellous.
It's a true act of piety.
It is, but you wonder how much you want it to remind you specifically of the person who is gone, or generally about about mortality. Because when recently, when I was on holiday last year, I was in holiday in Corsica, and I remember in one of the guidebooks talked about the difficulty of organising the Corsicans as fighters and warriors. Because when they went out on the battlefield, that as soon as anybody died, they insisted upon carrying the person who died back to the village. They had to be buried in the village, and this meant there was a continual stream of people carrying dead bodies away from the battlefield and back to the village. Now, when you actually saw those villages in Corsica, and you walked around, you noticed that what they had added to the usual graveyard that you see here were photographs. That all over the gravestones were photographs of the person at different ages.
Yes.
And when I looked at them, at first you're very startled by them, because usually there is something general about the death. But here were real faces staring back at you, and I thought that was too specific.
Who should have the authority over this? The person who is gone or the ones who remain? Basically, if I can think of a brilliant, witty remark on my tombstone, everybody else thinks it's pretty corny. Should it be put on anyway? Is it my right to expect this, unless I put it in my will, say they aren't going to get anything unless they put this, I think it was Lionel Barrymore said, on his tombstone, he wanted, I've played everything but the harp. And now you may think that's not good enough to have on, or
it's not even good enough for who's who.
Or the head waiter who had on God caught his eye. these are things that you might want to have on your tombstone.
Lionel Barrymore had an even better line than that. I can remember that when his father, Maurice Barrymore, was being buried, and they were standing there. Maurice Barrymore was an actor as well, but I think a boxer originally. When they were burying him, and Lionel and John were standing there, as the coffin went down, so the ropes got tangled, and they had to bring it up again, and Lionel said to John, just like Dad, a curtain call.
But, I say this about it being anecdotal, and it is, but there is something surely between the anecdotal and the impersonal. I know death is impersonal. We join the majority, to use Isherwood's phrase, but there is why I don't like those bone orchards that I refer to. They're somehow symbolised for me, but I offer you this to you, Roger, that by those little they look like those pottery things you hold pie crust up with, those little, it seemed hurriedly thrown up chapels that you find in suburban cemeteries. And, amid all these desirable rows of lovely resting places, it's the sort of conveyor belt feeling of the ceremonies that necessarily go on in those things that makes you feel, when you see these cemeteries, that you're queuing up for eternity in the mortuary equivalent of a cafeteria. Is there anything to be done about that?
Yes, there is some. That's why I want to be a municipal cremation, because I want that little bit longer time, and I want to go to one where there's only one chapel. It does annoy me that there's still two chapels in many places, but very often they're very splendid. They're very splendid. The crematoriums are the difficult places, because if you ever went to the Croydon Crem, it's like being on a West End set, and suddenly when the coffin is disappearing, these great gates come across, and I think, hallelujah, what are we up to now? And that I find very difficult, because one of the great things about chapels in cemeteries is they're cold, they're drafty, they're miserable, and they're saying you can cry, you can be upset. In crematorium chapels, they're generally saying, don't you dare cry, this is all luxurious.
It just occurred to me that there's a new way in which to keep the memories of the dead. I've been asked by Boston University, the Mulgar Memorial Library, for all my papers, you see.
Are you to be buried with them?
No, but they're going to assure me that all my papers are going to be kept in acid-free folders and acid-free...
And no monosodium glutamate.
Acid-free boxes, and no decay will ever touch them. Therefore, my children can always come and see them.
But I heard just a nice little revenge upon those ghastly crematoria that you were describing, where the possibility of crying is excluded by the comfort which is arranged for those people who are in the place. This is someone in America who asked if a small parcel could be put with his body before he was cremated, and the coffin duly moved through the door, and at that moment there was an enormous explosion because it included a bunch of firecrackers, so he went out with a huge bang.
Well, we're not going out with a bang. We're going out with a bit of Thomas Brown, because if I hadn't quoted him, someone else would. You're looking pretty blank. Well, there you are. I overestimate you yet again. But here we go. The night of time far surpasseth the day, and who knows when was the equinox? Pyramids, arches, obelisks were but the irregularities of vain glory and wild enormities of ancient magnanimity. The iniquity of oblivion blindly scattereth her poppy, and deals with the memory of men without distinction to merit of perpetuity.
Sarah Harrison, Milton Shulman, Roger Royle and Professor Laurie Taylor was stopping the week with Robert Robinson. Dillie Keane of Fascinating Ida provided the musical interlude, and the programme was produced by Michael Ember.